I'm using a iPad here, and I'm not used to that. I usually have my computer, but I'm going to try something new. I also am not going to use a teleprompter. I'm going to go a little bit off and just in a way of introduction to our topic today, serving others, maybe just share a little bit of personal testimony. You probably would never suspect it, but when I was growing up, I wanted to be a rodeo cowboy, specifically a bull rider. And every chance I got, I went to the rodeos. And one time in Toppenish, I snuck back by where they were getting on the bulls, and I stood there while one of the champion bull riders was getting on. And the bull smashed my toe because my cowboy boot was inside of the board that I was standing on. And I pretty much broke my big toe. But it didn't discourage me. I still wanted to be a bull rider. And so finally, when I was in college, I went to my first rodeo, and that on Battleground, Washington. It wasn't a big rodeo, but my heart was pounding, and I thought, I don't know if I really want to do this. But by then, I had to go through with it. And so when they announced me coming out chute number 3, and I had my spurs, and I had my bull rope and chaps and everything, and I was living my dream, and the bull came out, bucked about 3 times, and fell down right on top of my leg. And you know what that means? You get a re-ride. And so everybody was saying, re-ride, re-ride. And I was saying, oh Lord, please, no re-ride. And finally, the judges came over and they said, no re-ride, because he touched the bull with his other hand. I said, thank you, Lord. And that was my last time, but I just loved excitement. I loved to do exciting things, and I served as a doctor for different rodeos. And another time in Milton Freewater National College Rodeo, I was sitting on the fence as a doctor for the rodeo, and the bull rider got bucked off, was unconscious. And so I ran out there, and they were trying to get the bull on the other end of the arena with the horses. And everybody gathered around, and I checked him, and I looked, and my hand was all bleeding from where I checked his head. I thought, well, maybe his brain is coming out. And so finally he woke up, and he said, let me out of here. They never want to go out on a stretcher. And we're getting some feedback here. I don't know why. Anyway, so he got up and he refused any medical care. And so I walked back to the chute, and I realized that my hand was cut, and that's where the blood was coming from. And so what happened was, when I jumped off the chute, there was a nail there, caught my hand, and so the bull rider was fine. But anyway, so then I got into professional motorcycle racing, and I was a doctor down in Washougal National Race. And this is all the thrills that I wanted to have. And I didn't realize, to really be happy, this isn't where it's at. It's not about making money. It's not about power. It's not about being famous, but it's about serving others. And that's what I'd like to kind of show today. So some of the material this morning comes from the little book, The Power of Serving Others. Is there any way we can cut down on the feedback? I'm getting a lot of feedback here. So thank you. So most people really want to help others, but don't necessarily know how. And so it's an excuse that some people use. We don't know how to do it. Some people are looking for meaning. Most people are looking for meaning in their life, don't you think? Everybody wants to have some real meaning. And so they want significance, but we just don't know how to do it. And so we try accumulating money, doing the exciting things like I did. Didn't work. I'm thankful that I didn't ride that bull, because I didn't want to go down that road. But some people use drugs and alcohol, but you still feel empty. And I was over in China one time on a medical mission for 3 weeks, by underground churches, and I was supposed to speak in this big Chinese church, and I know that it's a communist country and you're not supposed to talk about Jesus. So before I went out on the platform, I said to the pastor, tell me what I can say and what I can't say, because they have spies, in the church from the government, and if you say the wrong thing, well, they're liable to escort you out and you'll never get to China again. And the pastor will get in trouble. One pastor was put in jail for 3 years because he let an American pastor speak in the Adventist church over there. So I asked him, I said, what can I say? He said, well, you're going to be talking about high blood pressure and heart disease. So you can, as long as you talk about high blood pressure and heart disease, you can say anything about Jesus you want with your laptop. And I said, oh, okay. And so I talked about how that some people, almost everybody, has a hole in their heart that can only be filled and only have meaning in your heart when you get Jesus in your heart. And I talked about how that the only way to have meaning is to have Jesus as our Savior. And then I talked about different cholesterol and high blood pressure and all kinds of things like that. And I put slides up and didn't get in any trouble at all. They said, as long as you have a laptop computer and you're talking about some medical things and health, you can preach all the gospel you want, which is an incredible thing. And so some people have used that same technology. If I was up there without a laptop and not talking about high blood pressure, if I would say something like that, I would be escorted right out of the country. So God has shown us some different ways that you can work. So after the presentation, probably 200 or 300 people there, and one lady came up, and she was all decked out. She had lots of jewelry. She looked like she was a very sophisticated lady, wealthy lady. And through the interpreter, she said, I'd like to ask you a question. And I said, sure. And there were a lot of people came up afterward to ask questions, and I was standing up in front of the church answering questions, and she said, when you were talking about that hole in the heart, were you talking about a literal hole? That we all have a literal hole in our heart? And so I said, some babies are born with a defect in some of the part of the heart, but the blood can go from the right to the left without going through the lungs and getting oxygen, and they can have what they call a blue baby, and they have to give medication and sometimes actually do surgery for different types of congenital heart problems. But I said what I was talking about was actually not about that. I was talking about that all of us have a sense of loneliness, a sense of wanting to have purpose in our heart, and that we can only get that from Jesus. And she said, well, that's what I'm looking for. She said, this is the first time I've ever come to a church. And she said, I'm a very wealthy lady. I have chauffeurs. I have multiple cars. I have beautiful mansion and homes. And she says, I'm a broker for furniture. And most of the furniture we buy in the United States, even the nice, expensive furniture, is all made in China, most of it. And she said, I'm a broker for that. And she said, but I'm not happy. She said, I'm just discouraged, and I don't feel fulfilled. And so I was able, right then, she gave her heart to Jesus, and several of the ladies, the pastor's wives, came up and surrounded her, and they put their hands on her and prayed for her, and she gave her heart to Jesus right there. And so this is the thing, when you realize that it's not about power, it's not about being wealthy, but it's about having a personal relationship with Jesus, I believe. There was a story one time when Elvis Presley was, after he died, I think it was his 40th anniversary of his death, and I was coming back from Canada, and I was listening to a documentary on his life. And they told a story. They said one time when he was Elvis Presley, he liked to sing Christian music, and whenever he would record, he would go into Studio A there in Nashville, and he would go in there, and there's a big black piano like this one over here, and he would sit there and play for about an hour and sing religious songs, Amazing Grace, and songs like that. And he would calm his nerves down, and then they would start recording. And sometimes they would record till 2 or 3 in the morning. And his producer would be upset because it costs a lot of money. You pay by the hour there. But Elvis just wanted to calm his nerves down, so he would sing these religious songs. So one night they were recording, and about midnight they broke so they could go to the bathroom and drink some water or whatever. And he just stayed in the recording studio. All his musicians left for a few minutes. And suddenly one of the attendants there saw that Elvis went over he sat down and he started writing on a piece of scratch paper. And he just wrote and he wrote and he wrote. About the time people started coming back into the studio for continuing the session, he wadded up that piece of paper, threw it in the garbage can, and they were ready to record. Well, this person, when no one was looking, went and got that piece of paper, put it in their pocket. And about 40 years later, after Elvis had already died, there was in New York, I guess it was, there was a big auction of some very special things from Elvis Presley. And John Denver got a call from one of his men and said, "There's something I think you might want to buy at this auction. There's a piece of paper that Elvis Presley wrote on in a recording studio, and we have that actual piece of ruffled paper. It's going to auction off." And he said, "I think you should get that. We should get that for you." And so John Denver said, "Okay, go ahead and get it, whatever it costs." And so I think they paid $20,000 for whatever it was. Got this piece of paper, and guess what it was? It was something like this. I don't remember word for word, but it says, "Why, when I have everything I want in the world, I have all the money I need, I have any women that I want, I have homes, I have vehicles, motorcycles, I have fame all over the world, but I just feel empty inside." And the whole note was like, why is it? It was questioning. Why am I not happy when I have everything that anybody could ever dream of, and yet I'm not happy? And so John Denver made a song, actually. And I don't remember the name of the song, but it was to that same effect, that we have to have something more than just fame and money and power and influence. And I believe that is serving others is basically the only way we can get that. And so I'd like to just show a few quotations from this book here, The Power of Serving Others. This is a book that helped change my life, to give me a different perspective. I read it several years ago. Dr. Gary Morsch is a physician, ER physician, and then there was a PhD, Dean Nelson, and they wrote this book here. And so in the book, there's a chapter, Get Over Yourself. It's a pretty amazing chapter. And I think it's written especially for doctors, so I hope there are no doctors here today. Because doctors, I hate to say it, but there's a certain disease that most doctors tend to get if they're not careful. And many doctors have it, not just doctors, but especially doctors. And it's called big shotism. It's when we think we're big shots and we think we're better than other people, and we talk down to our patients. We put our stethoscope around our neck, and we think that's really a symbol of prestige. But yet we're really not serving people, we're really not loving people, we're really not taking time with people. And so Dr. Morsch, he wanted to go over and kind of get a different perspective on his life. He didn't feel a lot of meaning. So he went over to Calcutta, where Mother Teresa was. And she had a organization. And over there she had the House of Dying Destitutes, it was called. And he wanted to go over and maybe work with her and offer his services. And he went over there with his stethoscope around his neck, and her the lady that was in charge there that day was Priscilla, Sister Priscilla. And he said, I'm a doctor and I think I can really help you and I can do this and I can do that. And what would you like me to do? And so Sister Priscilla looked at him and she says, okay, follow me and I'll show you what you can do. So he said they went through the first room and there was all these dying men in there at all different stages. It's like a hospice center. There's pus and blood and feces and urine, and it was terrible. The nuns didn't have hardly any resources. They were just trying to comfort them and wipe their forehead and just try to comfort them and pray with them. And so then they went into the next room, and here's all the ladies in there, dying, just terrible, sick and weak and moaning in pain and groaning. And she just kept on walking. He thought, well, I wonder where I'm going to be working. What do they want me to do? And so finally, they went out the back door and through the kitchen. And in the alley out there was a big pile of garbage, about this high. Dirty diapers, blood-soaked, urine-soaked sheets and all this kind of stuff out there. And she said, I'd like you to take all these, and there's a dumpster down 2 blocks down there. If you could just take this down there, that'll be your job for today. And he said, wow. He says, I didn't come over here all the way for this. I'm out of here. This is crazy. No shovel, no broom. I'm just supposed to pick this stuff up. And that's the true story. Pick this stuff up and take it clear down there. What people are looking at him and saying, what's he going to do? What's this doctor going to do? And then he got to thinking, he said, I'm just out of here. And then he thought, yeah, but if I go back to the States, what are they going to say? How was it at Mother Teresa's place? And he'll have to say, well, yeah, I didn't stay. So he said, I guess I better just do it. So later on that day, after he got done carrying that stuff down, he smelled terrible because he had to carry it in his hands. He said he suddenly realized that what she was doing was showing him how to really care for people. And that they didn't want a know-it-all, arrogant, whippersnapper doctor coming over and trying to give them medicine. That's not what these people needed. They needed hope and they needed love. And so this whole chapter was how you can get over yourself. And he said, with all my knowledge, medical knowledge and certainty, I arrived at the house of dying destitutes. I had something to offer, I thought. It's just the kind of place where a doctor should be assigned. But what happened was, he said, my heart melted. I had completely missed the point. I needed this lesson. Serving others is not about how much I know, how many degrees I have earned, or what my credentials are, but serving them with love. It's about attitudes and availability to do whatever is needed, whether it's garbage or whatever it is. Mother Teresa had pierced the armor I worked so long to construct. She removed the armor around my heart through Sister Priscilla. So my friendship with Mother Teresa blossomed after that. I understood her life and purpose better, and that made me want to work with her as many ways as possible. How many of you know David Gates? You've seen, I'm sure, he's a medical missionary. He's also a pilot, missionary pilot. He's a personal friend of mine. And one time a lady came to work for him. And this lady, he told this story to me, and he said that this lady, he asked her, well, where have you worked before? And she mentioned some places, and she said, oh, by the way, she said, I worked with Mother Teresa over in Calcutta. And he said, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, she said, I had quite an experience over there, she told David Gates. She said, when I went there, I wanted to work with Mother Teresa and learn how to take care of people and serve people. But I was afraid to tell her that I was a Seventh-day Adventist, because being a Catholic nun, she probably wouldn't let me work there. So she said, I just kind of didn't say anything. And so I started working there, and I don't know how long she worked, but it was several weeks probably, maybe even a few months. And one day, Mother Teresa called her into the office, and she was real upset with her. And she said, I need to talk to you. Come to my office. And she thought, oh, here it goes. Now I'm going to get fired. for whatever I did or didn't do. And Mother Teresa said, so are you a Seventh-day Adventist? She said, I just found out that I guess you're a Seventh-day Adventist. Is that true? And she said, yes. Yes, it is. She hung her head in embarrassment. And Mother Teresa said, well, how come you didn't tell me before? Why weren't you honest with me when you came? And she said, well, because I was afraid you wouldn't let me work for you if I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. Mother Teresa reached in her desk there and she pulled out a book, Ministry of Healing by Ellen G. White. She said, see this book right here? I base my whole ministry on this book. This is what I live for. Everything that we do here is about what Ellen White has written in this book. And you're embarrassed to say that you're a Seventh-day Adventist? I thought, man, this is amazing. So my admiration for Mother Teresa has gone very high. I believe there are many people, I personally know many people, nuns that work, because I went to a Catholic medical school. I worked in Catholic hospitals, and they've come and talked to me personally. I could tell you many stories. Many of these people are very close to the Lord, and they believe in the truth. And they're just like Nicodemus. They're in a situation where they just don't say publicly how they believe. So we have to be very careful. And you can't, I would just say, you can't judge people. I had an experience yesterday in the airport. I was in Spokane, coming over this and getting ready to get on my flight. Our flight was delayed half hour because of fog. And I was sitting there, and there was a gentleman, big burly guy, long hair coming down in his face, tattoos and big guy. And he had a suitcase, and there's some things written on his suitcase that didn't look very appropriate to me. But I thought, well, that poor guy, you know. Well, guess what? He ended up being my seatmate on the plane. And he didn't say anything. I didn't say anything to him. And we got pretty close to Seattle because it's only about an hour and 5 or 10 minutes flight. And then I was cleaning my glasses. I have some reading glasses I sometimes use for small font. And I had a little wipe, to clean my glasses. And very politely, he said, will you mind if I throw that away for you? He said, after I use it, because it clean my glasses. And I said, oh, sure. So I gave it to him, and he wiped his glasses, and he turned out to be a really, really nice gentleman. He talked to me, asked me what I did, and I told him I travel around the world, and I train medical, like paramedics and off-grid medical emergencies. Used to work in the emergency room, and now I'm training people all over. I told him about some countries I went to, and he said, well, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for what you're doing for everybody. And I said, well, what do you do? And he says, well, I'm a sports photographer. And he says, I go to all the National Basketball Association games. I'm the one that does the filming, with the big video cameras. And he says, I do the Major League Baseball. I filmed those games. I said, well, did you film the Astros and the Mariners? He said, I was right there the whole time. He says, I was even planning on going to the Dodgers game, but they didn't quite make it at the last game. Turned out he's one of the top videographers in the United States. And that's all he does is film all these games. And he's well known. And so by looking at him, you would never dream what a nice guy he was and how talented he was. And so I think we have to be really careful and don't judge people, how they dress, how they look, because it says in the New Testament, I think it's in Philippians. Let's turn to, I think it's Philippians 2, verse 3. There's an interesting verse here where Paul says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind. Now here's the part. Let each esteem others better than themselves. So when you look at somebody, maybe a poor person, a homeless person on the street. You look at somebody, do you consider them better than you are? That's what we're supposed to do. I don't care who it is. It could be a homeless person under the bridge. The Bible says that that's what we have to do. There's another verse, I think it's in Romans 12:10. It kind of says the same thing, similar. It says, be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love, in honor preferring one another. So how do we prefer others over ourselves? Because our whole culture, is to be better than everybody else. If we're playing a sport, we have to be better than they are. We have to win. We have to, whatever we do, we want to be better than other people. Well, we're told by our inspired lady that has written a lot of good books that we enjoy. She said, higher than the highest human thought can reach is God's ideal for his children. So we're not supposed to be sluggards. We're supposed to aim for the top, but not consider ourselves arrogantly. We're supposed to be humble. So that's how can you reach the highest human thought in your life and still be humble? And the only way we can do that is by serving others. And I think this is the key point I'm trying to make this morning, is how do we serve others? So I gave you that story already. The ultimate aim of the quest must be neither release nor ecstasy for oneself, but the wisdom and the power to serve others. Steve Jobs, that founded the Apple company, computer company. You know what his motto was? He said, people don't know what they need, because there were no iPhones back then, no computers. He says, what they need, we got to tell them what they need. We have to show them what they need. They don't know what they need yet, but we have to show them. And now I can go all over the world, in Africa, Central America, South America, everybody has a phone. Android usually, but in the States, iPhones. And even in Guatemala one time, I was getting a shoe shine down in the Central Park, and the guy in the middle of my shoe shine, he got a phone call. Barefoot Indian boy on his smartphone. And so everybody has phones now, but Steve Jobs had a vision to show people what they need. Well, do we know what people need? That's it. They hold the Bible. That's exactly what they need. And I know Charlie Kirk has made a difference. I asked I work at the Energy Northwest nuclear power plant down in Tri-Cities, and I do physicals on the security officers and the operators. And one big guy came in the other day all tattooed up and everything, and I was doing his physical, and I said, hey, by the way, what do you think of this Charlie Kirk thing? He says, well, Doc, he says, you know what? He says, I haven't read my Bible for a long time. But he says, after I saw what he did, he says, I've been pulling out my Bible and I've been reading it lately. And a lot of people, you can say whatever you want about Charlie Kirk, but he was on the right path, I believe. He was keeping the Sabbath. He was saying how important it was for families. And he was on the right path. And so we know what people need. We know what we need too, right? We need to come closer to Jesus. So if Steve Jobs knew what people needed before they ever heard of a phone that you could talk and do everything on, but he had that vision, well, we should also have a vision of what people need. And it's not just technology, but it's what they need is Jesus in their life and to have a personal relationship. Love for others is what we are to live by. When we see others as human beings that Christ died for, their needs become real to us. But we have to be concentrating on this every day. We have to pray every day for opportunities to serve other people. Howard Cutler, MD, says studies show that people most focused on themselves are more likely to have coronary heart disease. You know that? It's been proven that people that are selfish have more chance of having a heart attack. People that are happy and laugh and are pleasant, they don't have as many heart attacks and strokes. And so I believe that there's a lot of things happening. And in fact, this weekend we're having this afternoon over at the conference office. You're invited to come, I think. Is that all right, Alita? There's and quite a few people are going to be there. We're going to talk about how in the Washington conference they want me to explain some new ideas, some fresh ideas, and get back to basics about how can we serve other people. And we're told that in the last days, there won't be any ministerial work done except in medical work. Even our pastors are going to be doing medical work. I don't mean doctors and nurses. I mean helping them with their health. In India, we used to have these big, huge, when I was president of Gospel Outreach, we had meetings where 50 meetings are going on at once over there, thousands of people coming to the stadiums. That's over now. They don't allow that anymore. The radical Hindu government has stopped all that. And they said the only thing they can do now is medical work. Well, that's going to happen in this country too, very shortly, I believe. That we're not going to be able to have our television programs and our meetings, public meetings. It's going to be serving other people. So this afternoon we're going to be talking about, why do we have a special health message in the Adventist church? What's it for? What's the purpose of it? Is it so we can hide behind our curtains in the next pandemic with our masks on, afraid to go outside? Like one poor lady in Tri-Cities, Hispanic lady, she was in her house, had 2 masks on. She wouldn't even go to the door to pick up groceries that they dropped off. She was afraid the virus was going to get her. But she said, we have a health message. So instead of being behind our doors with our curtains pulled, scared to go outside, we're going to be going door to door and helping other people that are sick and dying. Because our immune system is strong and because we love people and God will help us and we will be protected. We won't get sick because we're living a health message, not so we can brag that we live 11 years longer. I'm sorry I got off on the little pedestal there, but that's the reason. We're going to be talking about that this afternoon, and we're even going to have a panel so you can ask questions if you want. The world needs each of us to serve others with whatever we have. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a nurse. You don't have to know anything. Most people, what they just need is some care, somebody that cares about them. There's so many lonely people. My organization is called Second Hope Ministries International, and everybody is living hopeless, hapless, and helpless. They need hope for this life, but they really need hope for another life. And so that's what we call it, second hope. We give them a second hope, not just for this life, but also hope for a future life. Service to others isn't limited to big dramatic acts. It's a lifestyle, okay? We can rescue a drowning person, but we need to have a lifestyle so if anybody has a problem, we're ready to help. There's a retired dentist, Dr. Knippel. I don't know, some of you I think might know him. Bob Knippel, a retired dentist. He lives over by one of my neighbors. And he is in our church, and he's organizing a group of us. And we're going to go, and we're going to do whatever needs to be done in the community. And he's not out pulling teeth as a retired dentist. He's going out and chopping wood and splitting wood and helping people. And he's organizing this, and that's what we're trying to do. And so I think that you don't have to be a professional at anything. And so we've already gone and helped a couple of different ladies with splitting wood. I think we did about 15 cords of wood one day. We had 2 wood splitters and people sawing and with the chainsaws, and it's really fun to do this. And it's really exciting when you're helping others. And I find probably more than anything in my life right now, the happiest I am is when I'm trying to do something for somebody else that needs it. I don't want anyone to find out what I'm doing. I just go and do it because it makes me feel good. I look forward to it. I go home, my back's aching after we have a professional wood splitter, and we take that over. And you do that for about 4 hours. I go home, and the first thing I want to do is get in the jacuzzi and soak my back a little bit in the 106-degree water in my jacuzzi. But I like it because it gives me meaning and purpose in my life, and I see what it does to people around us. You know, some people, I hope I don't step on your toes when I say this, but some people in other churches speak in tongues. Some of my closest friends are Pentecostals, Christians, and we kind of put them down because they speak in unknown languages. And yet Adventists, we speak in gossip. And gossip is more dangerous because when you speak in tongues, nobody knows what you're saying. But when you speak in gossip at prayer meeting, you say, I think we need to pray for so-and-so because I saw him, he's back on the bottle again. Or I saw somebody doing this. I said, we need to really pray for them. And then pretty soon, gossip's going all over. We have to stop this right now. In all of our churches, I believe it isn't so much worldliness that's coming in our church, but Satan is causing us to have a critical spirit. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to, I'm saying this for myself too, that we need to not be critical of other people. If we go to potluck and we believe that it's not good to eat cheese, and if you believe you should never eat eggs, and so forth, and so you got all these dishes, plant-based, no GMO, no gluten, everything with a little flag on it, and then somebody comes in that's a new Christian, doesn't know our health message, and they bring some macaroni and cheese, and everybody says, oh, you know, and this is what happens. The next thing you know, they've ostracized that person. That we got to stop this because our churches are a hospital for sinners, not a rest home for saints. And I think that if we do this, and I don't know anything about this church, but what I see, I don't think that's a problem here. Because you guys are I'm sure, not that way, but there's a tendency. Satan wants us to get in one ditch or the other. He doesn't care. He can get you in the ditch of ultra-conservatism where you legalists and everything, or he can get you in the other ditch. He doesn't care. And then what he really wants is to get us fighting among ourselves. But the best way to not do this is to continue to serve other people. Don't chase the wrong things. The way to get meaning into your life is to devote yourself to loving and serving others around you. And devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning. We don't know what we might get ourselves into. Things tend to be messier and more complicated than they first appear. We fear that serving others might take us where we lack the emotional energy to go. Some people are afraid. You know, it's not easy. When somebody's dying of COVID, the easiest thing is just to go drop a dish on their porch and don't bother going in to see them. You know, I took care of people during the pandemic, and even the pastors were not allowed to go into the houses to see them. But I prayed and I asked God to help. I never got sick, and we didn't lose a single patient because God was working. Hospitals, the patients were dying like flies. But we have a special health message, and it's not complicated. You know, I was asked by 13 black churches down in Los Angeles area to go down, and there are brothers of mine now, wonderful friends down there, and they said, could you come down for a weekend and give us a seminar on this, serving others? And, you know, they said, especially diabetes. Hispanics and blacks have tremendous diabetes problems. And so they said, could you please come down and talk to us about diabetes? One of our elders is in the hospital dying with diabetic complications. And so I went down there, and Friday night and Sabbath evening, and one brother raised his hand and he says, Dr. Fleck, we called you to come down to talk about diabetes and you haven't even mentioned it. Because I was talking about heart disease, strokes, high blood pressure. And I said, well, I got a surprise for you. The same things, lifestyle, that prevents heart disease, the same lifestyle that prevents cerebrovascular disease and strokes, the same lifestyle that prevents chronic kidney disease until you have to go on the dialysis, that's the same diet that's going to cure your diabetes. Oh, okay. So there's not a, you don't have to, it's real simple. Ellen White says a long time ago, pure health is pure circulation. Good circulation is good health. So whatever you can do to increase your circulation is you're going to have good health. But the blood has to be healthy. So healthy blood is healthy circulation and health and good health. And so suddenly they realized that to prevent diabetes and to treat diabetes is to live the diet that we've been talked about for a long time, that people make fun of, you know. But that doesn't become our religion. Because Paul said in the New Testament that religion is not what you eat or drink, but it's mercy and compassion and love, you know. In other words, we can't make diet our religion. But the same Paul said, whatever you eat, whatever you drink, what? Do all to the glory of God. So we have to have a balance, right? So I'm really excited about the concepts that now in medical doctor training, I have to take postgraduate education to keep my license. We all have to do so many hours every year. And I've been listening to all these lectures all over the country and by specialists in medical schools. And guess what they're talking about now? Used to be new drugs for this, new drugs for that. You know what they're talking about now? I just listened to a lecture on diabetes recently by one of the top specialists in the United States. And he said, we got to stop thinking about drugs. What are the risk factors for diabetes? You know that smoking, 30% chance of smokers to get diabetes from smoking cigarettes, vaping or whatever. He says, attack the obesity, to get the weight down, attack the lifestyle factors, and then you don't need all these drugs. Now, we still need drugs sometimes, especially insulin. If they can't produce any more insulin in their pancreas, so then they have to have some insulin to stay alive. But in other words, there's a big trend right now in medicine to attack the lifestyle factors and risk factors and to modify those and then help people get well. This is what we've heard from the little lady for a long time, 100 and some years ago. But now science is catching up and they're saying, let's not focus on Alzheimer's, okay? They thought they had all this figured out, that it was amyloid deposits in the brain and that's what causes Alzheimer's. And so they figured out drugs that will cut down on the amyloid deposition in your brain so you won't get Alzheimer's. And then they suddenly did one big study now, and they showed that a whole bunch of people, hundreds and thousands of people that had diabetes didn't have any amyloid. And then there were hundreds of people that was just the opposite. They're completely normal and they have amyloid in their brain. So now they're going back and they're starting to say it's the risk factors. How do you live? Exercise, diet, and all these things that we've been told for so long. And so it's just sad that sometimes science is ahead of us in confirming what we should have been doing all along. So it's exciting to know that we have a message. It's not just about diet, but about Jesus, about hope. There's I'm sure you're aware of all the way our country is going right now with all the violence and everything. Some people are just shy and they're reaching out to others. It's really hard, uncomfortable. Some people don't serve others because they think they don't have enough time or money. If you feel empty yourself, how can you give anything to anybody else? Maybe we don't serve others because we aren't aware of the needs of others. If you never associate, I was raised, not to be critical of my parents, but I think everybody at that time, we're not supposed to associate with people that aren't Adventists. Don't have any friends. Don't hang out with anybody that's not a Seventh-day Adventist. That's what happened to the Jews after they went in Babylon. Before Babylon, the Jewish nation, they were playing around with the Philistines and they were always trying to get into the world. When they came back, they went just the opposite. They came back to Jerusalem. They built up the city again. And now they don't want anything to do with anybody. They're exclusive. And so it's two extremes. So by hanging out, by mingling, it says there's only one way that we can serve other people. Jesus' method. He mingled with people. Okay, does that mean hanging out with them and drinking with them and going to their parties and doing all their foolish things with them? Or does it mean becoming friends with them, get to know them, understand what their needs are, and we don't have to do the foolish things that they're doing, but we can care about them and love them and be their friend. And I think she said, if you mingle with them and find out what their needs are and then serve their needs, that's Jesus' method. It's the only method. There's not two or three methods. And, I'm probably stepping on some more toes today, but I hope you'll forgive me. Story. 3 young men came to an evangelistic meeting, and the evangelist was so excited. 3 young men sitting right here at the start of the meetings. He thought, oh man, that's going to be good. And after about 3 meetings, they didn't come back. And he kept on going with the meetings, and finally about next to the last meeting or so, series was almost over, and here they came again. And they were sitting down there, and he said, oh man, I'm so glad to see those guys again. He went up to him after, and he said, oh, I'm so glad to see you come back. He says, we're sorry that we missed you. And they said, well, Pastor, we didn't know much about the Bible or anything, and we didn't know anything about Jesus. So we went down to the Baptist church, and we've been going there for the several weeks, 2 weeks now. And we learned about Jesus. We gave our hearts to Jesus, and now we want to find out what the rest of the story is. Find out about the prophecies and the beasts and all these things. And I think sometimes it might be better if we introduce them to Jesus first. And the Sabbath, who cares about the Sabbath if you don't know the Lord of the Sabbath? If somebody came to you and said, you need on May 14, you need to all send some gifts to Dr. Fleck. Well, you don't know me from Adam. Why are you going to send me anything on May 14? But if you become my friends and we hang out together and have fun and become like family, and you find out that's my birthday, then May 14 might have some significance, right? Not that I want you to forget May 14 now. I won't tell you my address. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is, why do we care about the Sabbath? Why does anybody care about the Sabbath if they don't have a personal relationship with Jesus? So I think that serving others is the entry wedge, not to get them into our church, but to introduce them to Jesus. Because we don't convert people. Who is it that does the converting? The Holy Spirit, right? And all we're just the means. So I want to just thank you for your attention this morning, and I want to tell you one final story, and then I'm supposed to be done in 6 minutes, so I'll try to do that. When I was over in India one time, Pastor Stanley, he was a union president at the time, over there in Kerala. It's in the California of India, the southwest corner of India. And he said, I want to tell you a story. He said, there was a gospel worker over here that worked for Gospel Outreach, and her husband, he died. He left a wife and 2 children, I think 2 or 3 children. And he said, what would you do if you're a pastor's wife and he dies? What would you do? Well, you know what she did? She said, in his memory, I'm going to keep doing the same work he did, even if I don't get paid. And she didn't get a stipend. The gospel workers are getting like $75 a month stipend, which over there still wasn't quite enough, but it's something. And she didn't get any stipend for 2 years. And she kept on with his work, praying for people, visiting people. Miracles, all kinds of miracles happened. People sick and got well when she prayed for them. And finally, she wanted to build a church. So she contacted the conference, and they said, yeah, we'll help raise some funds and build a church. And so they said, they finally built the church. And he said, we went over there to this town, and they had a big celebration. for the dedication of the new Adventist church in this Hindu village. So they're going down through the streets. They even had some elephants because they celebrate big time over there. And they had elephants and they had music and dancing, and people are going down the street, big crowd of people going to see the new Adventist church. And he said, we got down there to see the Adventist. We came around the corner, and guess where the Adventist church was? That far from the Hindu temple. And they were shocked. He said, what's this? And you know what? The Hindu leaders said, you have so many miracles with Celeste. On the way down there, people were coming out and kneeling at her feet and praising her and thanking her for what she had saved their lives and prayed for them. They said they wanted to have the Adventist church actually part of the Hindu church, actually touching, so we can have some miracles too. But they said, well, we can't have it touching, but we'll put it right next. And they gave them some land right next to the Hindu temple. That's how much that serving others helped that village. Because when you care about people, even the Hindu leaders responded. And they wanted to be part of us. They wanted us to pray for them because miracles happen. So I just thank you for your attention this morning, and I hope I didn't step on anybody's toes. And I hope that some of you might not eat too much for potluck and come over and join us this afternoon at the conference office. And I'm looking forward to this time for Alita, our leader for the conference, that invited us to come over, and looking for a good time this afternoon. But let's try to serve other people, because it's the only way we can be happy. And it doesn't matter whether you're cleaning somebody's house, you're taking somebody to the doctor. Doesn't matter if they're discouraged and you go and pray for them. You know, when somebody's suicidal, they're only suicidal for about 8 or 10 minutes where they're going to take their life. If you can intervene with some hope during that time, you can save their life if you know what to do. And so there's some training that can be going on, and we're going to do some diabetic training. There's some ways we can reverse type 2 diabetes, 80% chance. We're going to do some of that in the Washington Conference. So be sure and look for ways with your pastor, how you can work with the pastor here. You know, Ellen White said one thing. She said, the worst evil, there's many evils that can come in our church. The worst evil is when the medical and the pastors don't work together. It's a blended ministry. We have to support the ministers and work together with them. And they have to work with the medical. And work with blended ministry. We're trying to help people in every sphere of their life. So thank you for your attention. And I guess, are we going to have a closing song? And good. Thank you.